Hello. Today our chapter name is Post-World War Political Developments. Let's get into the chapter. In the physics textbooks till now, we have studied local self-government institutions, India's constitution and our political systems, our governmental structure. In this class, we are going to study India's relations with the world. We must have understood the world geography through the study of geography. You must have become familiar with the global historical events through the study of history. Now, through the study of political science, we are going to study India's relations with the world and some major global issues. We are dependent on different persons, institutions, and organizations in the society for different reasons and for different facilities. Our social life is interdependent and mutual cooperation has a very important role in it. Just as it is true with about individuals in society, it applies for different nations as well. There are many independent nations in the world like India. Some exchange and interactions goes on between them constantly. These independent states also enter into treaties with each other. A system of all these independent sovereign states come up. We call it international system. Let us get to know some features of this international system. Let's get into our first topic, interdependence. All the countries of the world are dependent on each other for one reason or the other. However big, prosperous, or developed a nation may be, it can never be self sufficient about all its needs. Even big nations have to depend upon other big or small nations. Thus, interdependence is an important feature of the international system, that is, today's global system. We have some information in this box. Let's read it. I wonder, we have 4 questions. Try to answer the questions. First one, what is the difference between the interdependence between individuals and the between nations? Is there such a division like rich countries and poor countries? Next one. Just as a country is governed by its constitution, is there some kind of constitution at a global level? Next one. Who enjoys the supreme position as an international system? Let's get into our next topic. International relations through foreign policy. Every nation have policies about its internal dealings, as also about its relation with other nations. Such as policy is called as foreign policy. We are going to study India's foreign policy in detail in the next chapter. We have an activity over here. Let's do this. Collect newspaper for a month and take cuttings of the news about different foreign countries. Classify the news on the basis of points given below and put up an exhibition. The points are: A. The visits of a country of persons holding important positions to other country. B. Treaties signed between our country and other country. C. An international conference convened in our country. D. Events with respect to our neighboring countries. Let's continue to the next page. Our next topic is background. Background. The world in which we live today has been shaped through many events and developments. Hence, we need to go back to history in order to understand today's world. We know that today's two world wars have been fought in the last century. These are the most important events in the world in that century. The world completely changed because of them. New events of thought emerged. Let us understand what has happened due to these two world wars. Firstly, First World War. The First World War was fought between 1914 and 1918. Major countries of Europe took part in it. Europe had a very central place in the international or global system in that time. The war caused a tremendous loss to life and property. The countries which joined the war suffered tremendous economic losses. Even the countries which did not join the war were impacted by the war. The economies of the victorious were as well. The losing countries collapsed. The countries involved in the First World War are the Allied powers: Britain, France, Russia, Italy, America; Central powers: Germany, Austria-Hungary, Ottoman Empire, Bulgaria. At the end of First World War, all the nations felt that such a war should not happen again, and some measures need to be taken to achieve that end. An international organization called the League of Nations was established out of this thinking. It became an important platform to solve international disputes and carry on negotiations. The main responsibility of the League of Nations was understood to be to avoid the war. After the First World War, major changes came about in Europe and outside Europe. For example, earlier empires in Europe collapsed and new nations came into being. Many European countries had their colonies in the continents of Africa and Asia. Movements of independence started in these colonies. These movements challenged the hegemony of the European nations. League of Nations was established after the First World War to establish peace, but it did not succeed at preventing war. Autocratic regimes came up in Germany, Italy, Spain, and other countries. All these developments culminated into the Second World War. Here we have a picture of Indian soldiers on the battlefield in the First World War. We have activity over here, think and write. The autocratic dictatorial regime of Hitler came up in Germany. What would have happened had the democratic traditions have been in Germany? What precautions should we take in order to prevent the rise of autocratic regimes? We have another activity. What is your opinion? The League of Nations was established to prevent war, but it failed to avoid war. What measures should the League have taken to prevent war? Our next topic is Second World War. The Second World War was fought between 1939 and 1947. It proved to be far more destructive than the First World War. Not only was it widespread compared to the First World War, but also more advanced technology was employed in this war. Countries which took part in the Second World War once gone faced a situation of economic crisis. We have an activity here. Let's write. The Second World War was fought between 1939 and 1945. What events were unfolding in India during this period? What was the effect of the Second World War on India? Countries involved in the Second World War. Allied powers and Axis power. Allied powers: Britain, France, Australia, Canada, New Zealand, India, Soviet Union, China, and America. Axis powers: Germany, Japan, and Italy. America played a major role in the Second World War. It has manufactured nuclear weapons. In order to end the war, it dropped two nuclear weapons on two cities of Japan, Hiroshima and Nagasaki, on 6th and 9th August 1945, respectively. The Second World War ended with the defeat of Germany in Europe and of Japan in Asia. Among many events that took place in the world after the Second World War was the beginning of the Cold War. The 1945 to 1991 was a long period of Cold War. Let us take a stock of a few changes in this period. The next topic is Cold War. America and the Soviet Union, who has been allies in the Second World War, became competitors as the war got over. The cooperation between them gave a rivalry. This rivalry occupied a period of 40 to 45 years on international politics. There was no open war between these two countries, but there was a tension in their relations that it seemed that a war could erupt any time. The concept of Cold War was used to describe the condition where there is no actual war, but there is such a tension and the circumstances that they may be responsible to cause war. In this period, America was already the superpower, but the Soviet Union also tried to become a superpower by making nuclear weapons and by increasing its military might. The struggle of power, arms race, difference in ideology, attitude of checkmating each other by tragedies and counter tragedies gave rise to the Second World War. Effects of the Cold War. Creation of military organizations. During the Cold War, both the superpowers created military organizations. The respective superpowers took up the responsibilities of the security of the country, joining the military organization led by them. NATO, North Atlantic Treaty Organization, was a military organization under the dominance of America, while the Warsaw Pact was the military organization under the command of Soviet Union. We have an activity here. What is your opinion? First question: is there any correlation between the advance in technology and world peace? Second one: how can technology be used for human welfare? The next thing, bipolarization of the world. During the Cold War, most countries of the world joined either of the two superpower blocs. Such a division of nations of the world in two groups is bipolarization. The scope of Cold War increased due to this. The sphere of tension spread. Let's get to the next page. We have an activity here. We have a world map on third page. You can look into it for any information regarding the country's location. Let's do this. The Cuban Missile Crisis was an important period in the World War. Find out more about it. It's an activity. I guess you guys will do it. We have information. Do you know? The Communist Revolution took place in 1917 in Russia, and the Soviet Union came into being. In a short while, the Soviet Union came as an upper power in the international politics, but there was extreme difference between America and the Soviet Union. For example, the USA was a democratic state advocating capitalism, while the Soviet Union advocated socialism and one party authoritarianism system. Both the superpowers wanted to expand their own dominance in the world. America wanted to spread capitalism, while the Soviet Union wanted to spread socialism. Both countries started making efforts to pull smaller countries into their respective blocs in order to increase their hegemony. As a result, Europe was ideologically divided. Western Europe countries joined the bloc led by America, while the Eastern European countries joined the bloc led by the Soviet Union. These superpowers exposed the fallacy of extending military and economical help to the countries of their respective blocs. Arms race. The superpowers started producing arms on a large scale to outsmart each other. There started a rivalry to make more and more destructive weapons to acquire the technology required for the same. But soon both the superpowers realized that the arms race may endanger international peace. Hence, efforts towards arms control and disarmament also happened during this period. Creation of regional organizations. Developing nations created regional organization at a regional level in order to ensure mutual cooperation in the context of the superpower rivalry. They felt the economic development was more important. European countries came together and formed the European Economic Community, while the Southeast Asian countries, Singapore, Thailand, Malaysia, Indonesia, Philippines, etc., established the Association of Southeast Asian Nations (ASEAN). Non-alignment. In the period of Cold War, while the world was becoming bipolar, there were some countries which did not want to join the power rivalry. Such countries decided to stay out of the Cold War rivalry. Their policy is known as non-alignment. Non-alignment was an important movement during the Cold War. Non-aligned movement. The Asian and African countries which became independent after the Second World War supported the idea of non-alignment. The movement started from 1961 under the leadership of India's Prime Minister Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru, President of Yugoslavia Marshal Tito, President of Egypt Jamal Abdel Nasser, President of Indonesia Dr. Sukarno, Prime Minister of Ghana Dr. Kwame Nkrumah. Evolution of non-aligned movements. The non-aligned movement was opposed to colonialism, imperialism, and racism. It has encouraged the resolution of international disputes by peaceful means. India led this movement under the guidance of Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru. India continued to actively support the movement afterwards as well. Even after the end of the Cold War, the importance of the movement has not reduced. The non-aligned movement is based on eternal principle of humanism, global peace, and equality. It has inspired the less developed countries to come together. It has encouraged the resolution of international disputes by peaceful means, while taking a firm stand on disarmament, fostering human rights. The non-aligned movement put forth the problems of poor, undeveloped countries firmly. The movement made a demand of new international economic order. Summarizing briefly, the significance of the non-aligned movement has not reduced even if the Cold War is over. It inspired the less developed countries to come together. It brought several new streams of economic and social challenges into international politics. It gave these countries this confidence to assert themselves with self-respect and international politics. End of the Cold War. The Cold War that had dominated international politics since 1945 came to an end. It was an important event that happened towards the end of the last century. There were many reasons for the end of the Cold War, as given below. First one. The Soviet Union adopted the policy of opening up the economy. The state loosened up its control on the economy. Second, the then President of Soviet Union, Mikhail Gorbachev, implemented the policies of perestroika or reconstructing and glasnost openness. Due to these policies, the control over the media reduced. Important changes took place in the political and economical spheres. That is, these spheres were reconstructed. They gave impetus to democracy. Third one, as the East European countries under the influence of Soviet Union adopted the capitalist and democratic paths, the regimes were changed. The Soviet Union disintegrated and several new nations were created out of it. Russia was the biggest in the Soviet Union. We have tasks over here. First one, why so? NATO still exists, but its nature is no longer military. Find out the countries that are members of NATO. We have another activity here, suggest a word. When there are only one and several superpower and several countries are dependent upon it, such an international system is called as unipolar. The division of nations between two superpowers is called as bipolarization. When many countries merge as superpowers in an international system, what can this system be called? It's an activity, you should guess a word which is suitable. We have another activity over here. Write an essay on the topic futility of war. Some points have been discussed below to help you. The points are: any problem can be solved by discussion and negotiation. Problems cannot be solved by war. War puts a spanner in the wheel of development. Let's continue to the next page and the next topic, post-Cold War world. The Cold War came to an end with the disintegration of the Soviet Union, which then had been the superpower. As a result, major changes took place in the world politics. For example, first one, America remained the only superpower in the world politics. A conducive atmosphere prevailed for the growth of trade and economic relations between and among the nations or countries. Capital, labor, market, and information circulated throughout the world. Ideas spread freely as well. As all nations of the world decided to give priority to the trade relations, the idea of giving aid to the other nations fell behind. Instead, efforts began to be made to establish economic relations. The description of a country which has opposed to another has now changed from enemy nation to the rival nation. The responsibility of the United States or United Nations has increased. The United Nations now have to take more concrete steps to maintain global peace and security. Environmental protection, fostering of human rights, gender equality, management of natural calamities now equip the global dimension. What is globalization? This is the last topic in our chapter, globalization. After the end of Cold War, trade and economic relations between the countries become more open. As been mentioned before, capital, labor, markets, and information began circulating globally. The give and take of ideas among people all over the world grew. Due to the revolution in information technology, different events and developments began to be known everywhere. The boundaries between nations did not remain as sacrosanct as they were before. All these processes are together called globalization. Just as globalization has brought us benefits, it has also caused losses. For example, as the economies of the different nations got linked with each other, trade increased, economic unification grew, plenty of products became available in the markets, but at the same time the gap between the poor and rich countries did not reduce. In this chapter, we studied global developments from 1945 onwards. We understood the world in a Cold War period, the arms race, and the effects of disarmament. We also learned about the meaning of globalization. In the next chapter, we shall study the India's foreign policy. We have an activity over here. Find out and participate. Find out about any two global organizations that work for protecting the environment. If you agree with their objectives, find out about opportunities for participation in for some of the activities. We have an exercise over here, starting with choose the correct option. Okay, I will wait for you guys to read the questions. I'll read it out once more. I want you guys to pause the video and to pick the correct answer, right? First one, choose the correct option and rewrite the sentence. A system of independent and sovereign states. Options: political system, international system, social system, and none of this. You can find the answer for this in the introduction. Second question, the main responsibility of the United States. First, to avoid war, independence of the colonies, improving the economics of the different nations, and disarmament. You can find the answer in the para after Cold War. Third question, the Cold War ended with this event. What is the event? Options: establishment of United Nations, disintegration of Soviet Union, creation of military organization, Cuban Missile Crisis. I think this answer you already know the answer. The question is too simple. Explain with reasons whether the following statements are true or false. First one, the League of Nations was established after the First Cold War. The world became unipolar due to the Cold War. Second one, the world became unipolar due to the Cold War. Third one, the policies of Mikhail Gorbachev gave the impetus of democratization. Third questions. Explain the following concepts: Cold War, non-alignment, interdependence, bipolarization, and globalization. The most important words in this unit. Okay. Fourth question. Give your opinion on the following topics. First one. What measures should the League of Nations have taken to avoid the Second World War? Second question. Non-alignment was necessary during the Cold War. Third one. Human welfare was neglected due to the Cold War. Fourth one, which countries came up as superpowers as competition to America in the present times? We have the fifth row here. Give brief answers. Write the brief answers for this. Compare the First World War and Second World War with the help of the table. You should compare. The points to be compared are period, involved nations, impacts, political and economic, international organizations established after the war. Second question, what were the factors responsible for the end of Second Cold War? What major changes occurred in global politics after the end of Cold War? And lastly, we have an activity here. Explain with example how different nations in the world are dependent on each other. The second one, discuss in your class what to intend to do inculcate the idea of Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam in the society. Thank you.